I buried my husband on a cold Tuesday morning, and as the dirt hit the coffin, I remember thinking, thank God you never lived long enough to see the truth. I was 27 when I learned how strong loneliness could make a woman. Back then, my hands were always busy, washing bottles, folding tiny shirts, stirring soup on a stove that rattled when the wind blew through the cracks of our rented house. People used to say I was brave. They'd pat my arm at church, bring casseroles wrapped in foil, and whisper things like, "She's doing it all alone." What they didn't know was that I wasn't just raising children by myself. I was guarding a secret so heavy it pressed against my chest every time I looked into my children's faces. My husband Daniel died in a factory accident before our youngest could even say his name. A crushed beam, that's what the men said. Quick, merciful. I nodded, wore black, and learned how to sleep on half a bed. Everyone told me my grief would soften with time. No one warned me that silence could grow teeth. I had 3 children then. Anna was 6, old enough to understand that Daddy wasn't coming home. She asked too many questions and watched me with eyes that already knew how to doubt. Samuel was 4, stubborn and loud, always demanding answers I didn't have the strength to give. And baby Ruth, sweet, quiet Ruth, was still wrapped in the smell of milk and talcum powder, too young to know what loss was. At night, when the house finally went still, I would sit at the kitchen table with a single lamp on and listen to the refrigerator hum. That sound became my companion. It drowned out my thoughts, or at least it tried to. But the secret had a way of rising in the quiet, tapping against my ribs, reminding me that love is not always clean, and truth is not always kind. I told myself I kept the secret to protect them. That's the lie I lived on for decades. The truth is, I was afraid. You see, before Daniel died, before the casseroles and the pity and the church whispers, there had already been cracks. Cracks no one noticed because I smiled too well and cleaned too often and kept my voice soft. Daniel was a good man to the world. He paid his bills. He shook hands firmly. He laughed loud at barbecues and carried our children on his shoulders. But goodness has layers, and some of them rot in the dark. The night everything truly changed wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no broken dishes, just a conversation that slipped into my bones and never came out. Daniel sat across from me at that same kitchen table, his fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "There are things you don't need to know," he said. That was how he told me, not what he told me, just how. I remember the smell of burnt toast, the way the clock on the wall ticked too loudly, the way my heart started pounding before my mind could catch up. When he finally spoke the words, I felt something inside me fold in on itself, like paper creased too many times. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just listened. And when he finished, I looked down at my hands and realized they were shaking. From that day on, every moment of our family life felt staged. Birthday candles blown out under a cloud of unease. Christmas mornings where laughter echoed too loudly, as if trying to outrun something. When Daniel died, people told me I must feel relieved that his suffering was over. They didn't know I felt relieved for an entirely different reason. Raising the children alone meant I could control the story. No slip of the tongue, no accidental confession. No past knocking at the door when the kids were old enough to answer it themselves. I became careful, too careful. I taught my children to lock doors, to distrust strangers, to stay close to home. They thought I was overprotective. I thought I was preventing an explosion. Anna grew up fast. She helped with Ruth, learned to cook by 10, and stopped asking about her father altogether. That scared me more than questions ever could. Samuel rebelled in quieter ways, missed curfews, slammed doors, long silences that felt heavier than shouting. Ruth stayed my shadow, her small hand always finding mine, her eyes full of trust that cut me deeper than any accusation. Sometimes I would watch them sleep, their faces soft and unguarded, and I would whisper apologies they could never hear. I imagined futures where the truth slipped out and destroyed everything I had built. College graduations ruined, marriages strained, children turning away from me with disgust in their eyes. So I stayed quiet. Years passed. The children grew. I aged in the mirror without noticing until my hair turned gray and my hands began to ache in the mornings. Daniel became a story I told carefully, sanding down the edges, leaving out entire chapters. The secret stayed locked inside me, patient as a snake curled under floorboards. Then, one evening, Anna came home with a look I recognized instantly. The look of someone who knows something is wrong, but doesn't yet know how bad it is. She sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Daniel once shattered my sense of safety, and said, "Mom, we need to talk." My heart sank in a way it hadn't in decades. And in that moment, I understood something terrible. Secrets don't disappear when you hide them long enough. They wait. Anna didn't speak right away. She stared at the table, tracing the worn groove near the edge with her finger, the same place her father used to tap when he was impatient. That small, ordinary motion made my stomach twist. "I found something," she finally said. Those 3 words felt heavier than any accusation. I swallowed and waited. I had waited my whole life for this moment, though I never admitted it to myself. Waiting becomes a skill when you are a woman carrying something poisonous inside her. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope, yellowed at the edges, the paper soft with age. My heart stopped before she even placed it on the table. I knew that envelope. I had hidden it behind loose paneling in the hallway closet, wrapped in a dish towel I never used. I had convinced myself it would stay there forever. "Why do you have that?" I whispered. "I was fixing the shelf," she said. "It fell out." Of course it did. Secrets always fall eventually. Gravity has a way of finding them. She didn't open it. That frightened me more than if she had. Her restraint told me she already suspected the truth was dangerous. "It has Dad's handwriting," she continued, "and someone else's name. A name I don't recognize." My chest burned. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I thought of lying. I was good at it. I had built a life on half-truths and omissions. But Anna wasn't a child anymore. She was a woman with lines of worry already forming around her eyes, lines I knew I had put there. "Anna," I said slowly, "some things are better left buried." Her head snapped up. "That's what you always say." The hurt in her voice cut deeper than anger ever could. I looked at my daughter and saw every night I had stayed awake convincing myself silence was love. "I raised you to be strong," I said, "not curious." "That's not the same thing," she replied. She slid the envelope back toward me, but her hand lingered as if she wasn't ready to let go. "I'm not asking to hurt you," she said. "I just need to know who my father really was." The word really echoed in my head. I thought of Daniel's smile, his laughter, the way he could charm a room. I thought of the other side, the one no one else saw, the one that trusted me with a truth I never asked for, a truth that wrapped itself around our family like ivy choking quietly. "I loved your father," I said. That part was true. Love can survive alongside horror. It's an inconvenient fact no one talks about. "But," Anna pressed, "but love doesn't erase consequences." She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms the way she used to when she was a teenager, bracing for disappointment. "Mom, you didn't just lose Dad. You lost something else with him. I've always felt it, like there was a wall in this house." I closed my eyes. That wall had been my doing, brick by brick, day by day. Before I could answer, the front door creaked open and Samuel walked in, his shoulders slumped, his face tired in that way only adulthood can make you. He looked from Anna to me and knew immediately something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked. Anna hesitated, then said, "I found one of Dad's letters." Samuel froze. His jaw tightened. "Letters?" he repeated. "Plural?" I opened my eyes. That was new. "What do you mean, plural?" I asked. He exhaled sharply and dropped into a chair. "I didn't want to bring it up," he said, not meeting my gaze. "But a man came by my work last month, asked if I was Daniel's son." The room spun. "What man?" I demanded. "I don't know. Middle-aged, polite, said he was looking into an old matter. He knew things, Mom. Things about Dad no one should know." Anna turned to him, her face pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want to scare you," he snapped, then softer. "And I didn't want to scare Mom." The irony almost broke me. Ruth wasn't there. Thank God for that small mercy. She still believed our family was simple, clean. I had protected her the hardest, maybe because she had been the youngest when everything fell apart. "Did he say what he wanted?" I asked. Samuel nodded slowly. "He asked about a woman, a name I'd never heard before." The same name in the envelope. My heart began to pound so loudly I was sure they could hear it. "This ends now," Anna said suddenly. "Whatever it is, we're done pretending. We deserve the truth." Deserve, such a heavy word. I looked at my children, grown, damaged in ways they didn't yet understand, shaped by a silence they never agreed to carry. I realized then that the secret hadn't just protected them, it had shaped them. "I need time," I said weakly. "You've had decades," Samuel replied. That night, after they left, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall, listening to the house settle, the same way I had after Daniel died. Only this time, the fear felt different, sharper, closer. I pulled the envelope from the drawer where I'd placed it earlier and opened it with trembling hands. Daniel's handwriting stared back at me, neat and confident, as if the words themselves had no idea how much damage they carried. At the bottom of the letter was something I had tried not to think about for years. A promise, one I had broken. And as dawn crept through the curtains, I knew with a certainty that made my stomach drop. The truth wasn't just about Daniel. It was about the children. And once they knew it, none of our lives would ever be the same. By morning, my body felt hollow, as if the night had scooped something essential out of me. I made coffee I didn't drink and toast I didn't eat. The house smelled like old paper and regret. I sat at the table and reread Daniel's letter until the words blurred, until I could recite them without looking. He had written it years before he died, back when the children were still small and the lie still felt manageable. He wrote like a man trying to confess without actually confessing, circling the truth instead of stepping into it. "If anything ever comes to light," he had written, "promise me you'll protect them. Not tell them, not prepare them, protect them." At the time, I had clung to that word like a life raft. Protection gave me permission to stay silent. Protection. Let me believe I was being noble, even when my stomach twisted at night and my dreams were filled with doors slamming shut. I heard Ruth's car in the driveway just after 9. I hadn't expected her. My heart leapt into my throat. She had always been the most sensitive, the one who read emotions the way other people read books. If something was wrong, she'd feel it before anyone spoke. She came in with a smile that faded the moment she saw my face. "Mom," she said softly, "what happened?" I looked at my youngest child and felt something inside me crack. She still called me Mom the way she had when she was 5, one syllable, full of trust. I wondered if she would still say it the same way by the end of the day. "Your brother and sister came by last night," I said. Her brow furrowed. "About what?" I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat, folding her hands in her lap. She had Daniel's eyes. That realization hit me again and again over the years, sometimes like a comfort, sometimes like a curse. "There are things about your father you don't know," I said. She inhaled sharply but didn't interrupt. That hurt more than if she had. Silence runs in families like a bad habit. "Someone has been asking questions," I continued. "About the past." Her mouth tightened. "Is this about why you never talk about him?" I nodded. Ruth leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if the answers might be written there. "I always thought you were protecting us from grief," she said quietly. I almost laughed, almost cried. "Not grief," I whispered. "Consequences." She turned back to me, eyes wide now. "Mom, what did Dad do?" The question landed between us, heavy and unavoidable. For a moment, I considered lying one last time, a smaller lie, a gentler version. But then I thought of Anna's eyes, Samuel's clenched jaw, the stranger at my son's workplace. The past was already knocking, hard. "Your father wasn't who everyone thought he was," I said. "He made choices that could have ruined lives." "Whose lives?" Ruth asked. "Yours," I said. The word fell like glass. She stood up so suddenly her chair scraped the floor. "That's not fair," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't get to say that and stop." "I'm not stopping," I replied. "I'm trying to begin." She paced the kitchen, running a hand through her hair the way she did when she was anxious. "Is this about another family?" she asked. "Another woman?" I flinched. "So it's true," she said, bitter now. "He cheated." "Yes," I said, "but that's not the worst of it." She stopped pacing. "Then what is?" I closed my eyes and felt the weight of years press down on me. When I opened them, Ruth was crying silently, tears sliding down her face without a sound. I realized then how much I had underestimated the damage of not knowing. Mystery can be crueler than truth. "There was a woman," I said slowly, "and a child." Her breath caught. "Another child?" "Yes." Her face crumpled. "We have a sibling?" I shook my head. "Not exactly." The room seemed to tilt. Ruth stared at me, confusion giving way to fear. "What do you mean, not exactly?" I stood and went to the hallway closet. My knees ached as I knelt and pulled away the loose paneling. Behind it was a small metal box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were papers I had sworn I would destroy one day, and never found the courage to. I brought the box back to the table and opened it. Ruth watched, frozen. "There was an investigation," I said, "before your father died. Something from his youth. A mistake that followed him longer than he expected." "What kind of mistake?" she whispered. I handed her a document, yellowed but official. Her eyes moved across the page, and I saw the moment comprehension dawned. It was subtle but devastating. Her hand began to shake. "This says—" She couldn't finish. "Yes," I said. "Your father was accused of something terrible." She looked up at me, horror etched into her face. "Accused?" she repeated. "Or guilty?" That was the question that had haunted me for decades. "He admitted enough to make me believe it," I said, "but not enough to put him away." The case was buried. The woman disappeared. The child was placed somewhere else. Ruth covered her mouth. "Why didn't you leave him?" I swallowed hard. "Because by the time I knew, I was already pregnant with you." Her eyes widened. "What?" "He begged me to stay," I continued. "He promised he had changed. He said the past was dead. I chose to believe him." Ruth's voice broke. "And us? I chose you," I said fiercely. "Every single day." And she sank back into the chair, clutching the paper like it might bite her. "So this man, the one asking questions—" "He's looking for answers," I said. "And he's getting closer." Ruth looked at me then with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not disgust. Fear? "For what?" she asked. I hesitated, then told her the part I had never said out loud. "For the child," I whispered. "Because that child grew up." Ruth's breath hitched. "And? And that child," I said, my voice barely audible, "knows about you?" The silence that followed felt endless. Ruth stared at me, realization crashing over her like a wave. "You're saying," she began slowly, "that this person, our mom, is connected to us?" "Yes." "How?" I looked at my youngest child, the one I had protected the most, the one whose life I had shaped around a secret, and felt my heart break open. "Because," I said, "the truth isn't just about what your father did." She leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. "It's about who you really are." Ruth didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at me, as if she were looking at a stranger wearing her mother's face. I watched her eyes search mine, hunting for reassurance, for a punchline, for anything that might soften what I had just said. "Who I really am?" she finally whispered. "What does that even mean?" My throat tightened. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times, but now that it was here, every word felt sharp and dangerous. "It means," I said slowly, "that some truths are written into us before we're old enough to choose them." She shook her head. "You're not making sense." I took a breath so deep it hurt. Ruth, the child from your father's past, wasn't just connected to us. Her eyes widened, and I saw understanding flicker for a split second before she pushed it away. No, she said quickly. No, that's not what you're saying. I'm afraid it is. Her chair scraped backward as she stood. You're telling me I'm... She stopped, choking on the word. That I'm not his. I stood too, reaching for her, but she stepped back as if my touch might burn her. He raised you, I said. He loved you. He... Answer the question, she snapped. Her voice cracked, and that sound broke something inside me. Was he my father? No, I said, not by blood. She let out a sound I had never heard before, half laugh, half sob. So what am I to him? You were his second chance, I whispered, and my salvation. Ruth pressed her hands to her temples. So, the woman, the one he hurt, her child, she couldn't keep the baby, I said. The courts decided it was safer that way, but the child didn't disappear. He was placed for adoption. Her eyes snapped to mine. Adoption? Yes. Her face drained of color. Mom? She said slowly, carefully. Are you telling me I was adopted? I nodded. She staggered back, bracing herself against the counter. No, she said. You're lying. You have to be lying. I went to the metal box again and pulled out another folder. This one thinner. Official stamps, dates, a name crossed out and replaced with another. I handed it to her. Her hands shook as she opened it. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I watched her eyes scan the page, watched her chest rise and fall faster, watched the moment her world split cleanly in two. Oh my God, she whispered. I wanted to tell you, I said desperately, so many times, but every time I looked at you, I saw my daughter, not a piece of paper, not a past, you. She slid down into the chair, papers slipping from her fingers. My whole life, she murmured. I felt different, like I didn't quite fit. I thought it was just me. It wasn't, I said. It never was. She looked up at me then, tears streaking her face. Does Anna know? Does Samuel? No, I said. Not yet. Her mouth twisted. So I'm the only one who isn't really... You are really my child, I interrupted, my voice breaking. I chose you. I fought for you. I loved you from the moment I held you. She shook her head. But you lied. Yes, I said. I did. The word hung between us, ugly and undeniable. She stood abruptly and grabbed her coat. I need air, she said. I need space. Ruth, please. I can't breathe in this house right now, she snapped, then softened. I'm not saying goodbye. I need time. She left without another word. The door closed behind her with a finality that made my knees give out. I sank into the chair, staring at the scattered papers, feeling the years collapse in on me. I had known this moment would come. I just hadn't known how deeply it would hurt. By evening, Anna and Samuel returned together. They could tell immediately that something had changed. Anna's eyes flicked to the papers on the table. Samuel's jaw tightened. You told her, Anna said. Yes, I replied. Everything? Samuel asked. Yes. And? Anna pressed. And she left, I said. To think. Anna exhaled sharply and sank into a chair. So it's true, she said. All of it. I nodded. Samuel stared at the wall. So that man, he said slowly, the one looking for answers, he's connected to Ruth, I said. How? Anna demanded. I hesitated, then spoke the words I had feared most. Because he's her biological brother. The room went silent. What? Anna breathed. Your father hurt their mother, I said, my voice shaking. She lost custody. Ruth was adopted by us. Her brother was adopted elsewhere. He's been searching for her. Samuel slammed his hand on the table. You let us grow up with this man knowing what he did? I let you grow up safe, I said fiercely. I watched him. I never left you alone with him. I made sure. You still lied, Anna said quietly. Yes, I admitted, and I will carry that guilt to my grave. Anna rubbed her temples. Ruth has a right to know him, she said. I know, I whispered, and I'm terrified. Samuel looked at me, eyes hard but wet. What happens now? I thought of Ruth somewhere out there, her identity shattered. I thought of the man who had come asking questions. I thought of the past finally catching up. Now, I said, the truth finishes what it started. And as night fell over the house, I realized the secret I had carried for decades hadn't destroyed my children yet. But it wasn't done testing us. The first night after Ruth left, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the dark living room with a blanket around my shoulders, listening for a car in the driveway that never came. Every sound made my heart jump. The wind against the window, the old clock ticking, the house breathing the way old houses do. I realized then how much of my life had been spent waiting for something terrible to happen, and how exhausting that kind of waiting really is. By morning, my body felt ancient, not just old, used, worn thin by decades of holding things together with silence and prayer and sheer stubborn will. Anna called before I could finish my coffee. She didn't answer my text, she said. Have you heard from her? No, I replied. There was a pause, then softer. I'm going to try again. I thanked her and hung up, though gratitude felt like the wrong word. Nothing felt right anymore. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. I knew before I opened it who it would be. The man stood on my porch with his hands clasped in front of him, polite, patient, carrying the weight of a past that had clearly shaped him. He was taller than Daniel, broader in the shoulders, but those eyes were unmistakable. I had seen them once before, in a hospital room filled with shame and paperwork and whispered decisions. Mrs. Collins? He asked gently. Yes, I said. My name is Thomas, he continued. I believe you know why I'm here. I stepped aside and let him in. The house felt smaller with him inside, as if it recognized him and didn't approve. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. That table had borne witness to too many truths already. I wondered if it could hold one more. I'm not here to cause trouble, Thomas said. I just want answers. I know, I replied. You adopted a child, he said carefully. A girl around 35 years ago. Yes. She's my sister, he said, not as a question, but as a statement. Yes, I whispered again. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. I spent years trying to understand where I came from, he said. My adoptive parents were kind, but they didn't know everything. When I finally got access to my records, your husband's name came up. I flinched. I'm not here to defend him, Thomas continued. What he did ruined my mother's life. She never recovered. But I've learned something over the years. What's that? I asked. That silence doesn't heal anything, he said. It just moves the pain to the next generation. The words hit me harder than any accusation. She knows now, I said quietly. Ruth, she knows. His eyes softened. And how is she? She shattered, I admitted, and I don't blame her. He nodded. I don't blame you either. I looked up sharply. You should. He shook his head. You were young. You were trapped in a situation no one prepares you for. You chose to love a child who wasn't biologically yours. That counts for something. Tears filled my eyes despite myself. I thought I was saving her. You did, he said. But you also hid part of her from herself. Yes, I said. And now I may have lost her. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. Will you let me meet her? I closed my eyes. That's not my decision anymore. He nodded, accepting that. If you speak to her, tell her I'm not here to take anything away from her. I just want to know her. After he left, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat alone for hours, replaying the conversation, wondering how many different choices might have led to a gentler outcome. Regret is a strange thing. It doesn't shout. It whispers over and over until you can't tell where it ends and you begin. That evening, Ruth finally called. Her voice was small. Careful. Can I come by? Yes, I said immediately. Too immediately. I softened my tone. Of course. When she arrived, she looked like someone who had aged 10 years in a single day. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped. She didn't hug me when she walked in, and that absence hurt more than anger ever could. I met him, she said as soon as we sat down. My heart stopped. Thomas? She nodded. He found me. Or maybe I found him. I don't know. What did he say? I asked. He told me the truth, she replied. His truth, and then he told me yours. I swallowed. And? And he said something that scared me, she continued. He said I'd have to decide who I am now. I nodded slowly. He's right. She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing all the years etched into my face for the first time. Do you know what hurts the most? She asked. I shook my head. It's not that I was adopted, she said. It's that you were afraid I'd stop loving you if I knew. The words broke me open. I was terrified, I admitted, because loving you was the one thing I never doubted. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know who my father was, she said, and I don't want to, but I do know who my mother is. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. I'm angry, she continued, and I need time, but I'm not leaving. I sobbed then. Not quietly, not gracefully. Decades of restraint poured out of me, and she let it happen, just holding my hand while I cried. I don't know what comes next, she said softly. Neither do I replied. But for the first time in years, the secret wasn't pressing against my chest anymore. It was out in the open, breathing, waiting. The days after the truth came out felt strange and quiet, like the world after a storm when everything is still standing, but nothing feels the same. Ruth stayed close, though not close the way she used to. She slept in the guest room instead of her old bedroom. She spoke gently, carefully, as if each word had to pass through a filter first. I learned to accept that distance as part of her healing even when it hurt. Anna and Samuel came by often. There were long conversations at the kitchen table, voices rising and falling, anger surfacing and softening, questions asked that had no clean answers. Sometimes we cried together, sometimes we sat in silence. I didn't try to control it anymore. I had done enough controlling for one lifetime. A week later, Ruth told me she wanted to meet Thomas again. I need to hear things for myself, she said. Not as secrets, not as fragments. I nodded. My heart pounded with fear and hope, all tangled together. I'll respect whatever you decide. She gave a small smile. That's new for you. She wasn't wrong. They met at a small cafe downtown. I didn't go with her. This was her story now, not mine. I waited at home, staring out the window, replaying every moment of her childhood, the scraped knees I kissed, the bedtime stories I read, the nights I sat by her bed when she was sick. I wondered if those memories would still belong to me when all this was over. When she came back, it was dark outside. She hung her coat carefully, like she always did, then sat across from me. I waited. I had learned how to do that. He's kind, she said finally, in a quiet way. I nodded. He told me about his life, she continued, about his adoptive parents, about the questions he carried for years, about his mother. She paused. He doesn't excuse what our father did. Our father, not your father. The words landed gently but firmly. I didn't expect him to, I said. He doesn't want anything from me, she added. No replacement, no title. He just wanted to know I was okay. Tears burned my eyes. And are you? She thought for a long moment. I'm getting there. We sat together, the space between us no longer sharp, just tender. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. The secret that had once felt like a threat began to lose its power. Not because it was small, it wasn't, but because it was no longer hidden. It stopped growing in the dark. Ruth didn't suddenly become someone else. She didn't change her name or erase her past. She added to it, slowly, carefully. She learned where she came from without letting it define where she was going. Watching her do that taught me something I wish I had known earlier. The truth doesn't steal love. Fear does. One afternoon, months later, Ruth sat beside me on the porch, the sun warm on our faces. "I used to think being your child was something fragile," she said, "like it could be taken away by one piece of information." I held my breath. "But it's not," she continued. "It's something we built, day by day." My eyes filled. "I should have trusted that." "Yes," she said gently, "but you didn't, and I forgive you." Forgiveness is not a moment. It's a process. But that day, it began. As for me, I aged differently after that, lighter somehow. I stopped flinching at unexpected knocks on the door. I slept through the night more often than not. I even dreamed, something I hadn't done in years. Not nightmares, just ordinary dreams, grocery lists, laughter, sunlight. Daniel's memory changed too. He no longer lived as a shadow over everything. He became what he was, a man who made terrible choices and left behind consequences that others had to carry. I stopped defending him. I stopped hating him. I let him be part of the past where he belonged. On my 75th birthday, my children gathered around the table. Anna, Samuel, Ruth, and even Thomas sent a card. Simple, respectful. It didn't feel strange, it felt honest. Ruth stood and raised her glass. "To Mom," she said, "who raised us alone, who made mistakes, who loved us fiercely even when she was afraid." Didn't I cried then? But they were quiet tears, the kind that don't hurt. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my bedroom and opened the metal box one last time. I looked at the papers, the letters, the proof of a life lived in fear of exposure. I folded them carefully, not with shame, but with acceptance. Then I let them go. I am an old woman now. My hands shake sometimes, my memory slips. But there is one thing I know with absolute certainty. I did not raise my children alone because I was hiding a secret. I raised them alone because love, real love, requires courage. And sometimes courage comes before wisdom. The secret could have destroyed us. Instead, the truth set us free. There is only one thing left to say, and it is the simplest truth I learned too late to teach myself young. I thought secrets were cages, something you lock others inside to keep them safe. But secrets are mirrors. They bend the way you see yourself until you no longer recognize who you've become. For years, I mistook endurance for virtue and silence for strength. I told myself I was surviving. In truth, I was hiding. What saved us in the end was not forgiveness alone, nor understanding, nor even love, though all three mattered. What saved us was honesty arriving at last, imperfect and painful, but real. It did not erase the past. It did not undo harm. But it gave us ground to stand on instead of shadows to tiptoe through. My children are grown now, living lives stitched together with both truth and tenderness. They still argue. They still hurt each other sometimes, but they do it in the open. And when they laugh together, there is nothing crouching beneath the sound, waiting to be discovered. As for me, I live quietly. I water my plants. I sit in the sun. I tell my story when it is asked for, and I keep silent only when silence is kind. I raised my children alone while carrying a secret that could have destroyed them, but it didn't. Because in the end, love was louder than fear. And truth, once spoken, finally let us all come home.